Greetings and salutations to everyone out there in the world listening and tuning in. Welcome to this week's episode of Speak to the Mic. I'm your host, Marlon Joseph. Before I go any further, I definitely want to make sure I give a quick shout out to Power in Black, the Black-owned business where I purchased this T-shirt from. Obviously, this is my solidarity shirt for Kaepernick, who's my frat brother and my brother in Power. Out there on the front lines, making a difference in the community, which is pretty much the premise behind this podcast in general, right? So I definitely want to make sure each and every episode that you guys see me on, I'm going to always be promoting and supporting a Black business by wearing a Black business T-shirt. And so I actually purchased this shirt, but this is free advertising. I'm not looking to, get any discounts or anything like that. I want to just let it be known that I am a huge supporter of Black businesses and will continue to do so, to the best of my ability. And so I'll provide the information on them. You can follow them on their social media accounts, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. I've actually bought a couple of shirts from them that I'm definitely impressed with. So, moving forward in upcoming episodes, you'll see me always, promoting and displaying a T-shirt that I've actually purchased from Black business. And I believe in the fact that we have to, as Black consumers, we have to put our Black dollars in where they would be most appreciated in, and that's our Black business entrepreneurs. And so, definitely want to make sure I get that shout out. Also, without further ado, going into this episode, I definitely want to make sure I highlight the focus of this episode, which is to bring forth light about police brutality and to help understand how we can build a gap. Bridge that gap between police officers and the Black community. And so I actually have my panel guest for today. One is having some technical difficulties right now joining in, but she'll join in as soon as she can. But what I have with me, this person in particular is not only a Baltimore police officer, but he's also a very dear, loving cousin of mine who I definitely always check up on and just want to see how he's doing because I understand the severity of his job and want him to come home safe each and every day and doing his job. And I know he has a good heart to want to make a difference in the community and to, basically live by those objectives of serving and protecting. Give it up for Christopher Nunn, who's a Baltimore police officer out there in the trenches. Definitely appreciate you being on the show with us today. My other panel guests who will be joining sooner than later is Alex Marie. She's actually a Chicago police officer. She and I actually graduated from high school together in Chicago. And so the funny thing about all of us is that we're all from Chicago. And so we understand on so many different levels how things go in the communities that we come from. And so to have these two individuals who are indeed law enforcement out there making a difference is greatly appreciated. And so I definitely want to make sure I'm very much so letting this be known that this is not about bashing the community. This is not about bashing the police officer and law enforcement at all either. So it's about us how we can best help each other with being able to be served and protected, as well as being able to, if we see something, say something. So helping the police officers do their jobs and trusting that they will do their jobs in the same breath. And I definitely want to make sure I highlight that so that there's no confusion whatsoever with where the premise behind this particular episode is and what area and direction it's going towards. And so, without further ado, I definitely want to just jump right on in and get to it. Chris, my first question to you is in regards to, in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests that's been going on with all of with the recent killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, even to a lesser degree, Ahmaud Arbery was actually killed by a former investigator here in the state of Georgia, down there in Brunswick, Georgia. And even with the recent development news and information that was given out about Elijah McClain and his situation that happened, which resulted into his death in Colorado. there's been a lot of talk about defunding the police and law enforcement reform to a lesser degree. And I just want to know from your opinion, what do you think those terms mean? When you hear defund the police and law enforcement reform, what comes to mind to you?
Well, I mean, with the defund the police, it's hard to say just because, I've talked to people who support the movement, but it seems like you talk to three different people, you get three different answers. But as to what defund the police means to them, now in my mind, one definition that I've heard that I support is uh, reallocating resources to like mental health experts so that police aren't the first people going to certain calls. But certainly, like we deal with it a lot here, we call them EPs or emotionally disturbed people. That we get calls for those where necessarily, like, no, I'm not a mental health expert, right? I might not be the best person to go, but there's nobody else for the family to call when this person's having a psychotic break that needs to go to the hospital. Now, at the same time, so that's what I think of when I think defund the police instead of the zeroing out the budget, just reallocating certain resources for different people. As far as police reform, well, I mean, police work isn't like a monolith. It has to keep evolving. You can't just set one standard and never revisit it. So I'm fine with reform that makes sense. Just it has there has to be input from both sides of it, from both the police side and the civilian side, so that we can find some middle ground.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that too. I definitely do agree with that, especially knowing that. And here's the thing too about the police reform, right? So understanding from a systematic standpoint that law enforcement began in more so in the South when it came to slave patrol, right? So a lot of people that I've talked to in recent weeks and days have definitely reminded me of the fact that law enforcement originally started that way to basically find lost slaves or slaves that were leaving their plantations and lost and things of that nature. So this particular system, or this way that the system is formed, was not necessarily designed to even protect us as Black individuals, because think about it, back then we weren't necessarily labeled as human beings. We were slave, we were property. And so from that standpoint, obviously reforming something that necessarily didn't even include us in it can sometimes be, if you think about it, it can be much more impossible of a task to do versus just revamping the entire system, making sure that everyone is included with it all together. And so from that standpoint, I do feel that. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I was just about to ask you to that point. Do you know what the two oldest police departments in the country are? The two oldest were Boston PD, New York PD. They were started as night watch to protect businesses when the people went home. I know the ones in the South, yes, those were slave ones, but the northern police departments were about protecting property.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I want to make sure it's a great point to make.
Crime.
Yeah. And so, and even with the division between the North and the South, obviously during the Confederacy and things of that nature, that they obviously had different rules and different laws they set for themselves. Anything short of the Mason-Dixon line, this is what they did. And so obviously, not to delve into too much of the Confederacy versus the North, obviously we know that there were a lot of different laws in place at the time that differed from what the North was doing. And to your point, yeah, New York and other police departments obviously were designated and created for that reason, to help protect properties versus the properties that were being, I guess, policed or patrolled over were human beings, were Black people, were us. You know what I mean? So yeah, from that standpoint, it's definitely something that has to be recognized as far as the differences between the two. And so, um, give me one second. I want to pull up something that I actually found that a lot of times gets misconstrued too. That I actually found, I researched this to confirm the validity of it. Um, so there's been a lot of talk about that defunding the police aspect of it, right? When it comes to being able to understand how much money is being allocated, uh, to each police department. So the number one police department that gets the majority, the most funds from the government is the state of New York. New York PD actually gets almost $6 billion in um, just for police funding, right? So versus the amount of money that's is going towards, education, community outreach programs, mental health to to a lesser degree that you mentioned before, and being able to identify those different things that the community needs versus the things that are obviously being funded and supported for law enforcement. So now me personally, I have a huge problem with us as taxpayers paying money for police officers to have body cameras and dash cams only to turn them off, only to say it malfunctioned, right? So me being an analyst guy, oh, here we go. All right. Before I delve into that particular point, I want to definitely make sure that we were already starting to talk about the funding of police and law enforcement reform, Alex. So yes, without further ado, let me also introduce you all to a very dear friend of mine who I love and appreciate and went to high school with in Chicago. Alex is a Chicago police officer who's working on her PhD right now, and so definitely want you to chime into this too once I conclude my point on this. So, as far as the funding of the police goes, the top three police departments that's being funded the most money in each and every one of those particular cities and states is New York, LA, and Chicago. Chicago is at, I think, 1.2 billion, or even at least close to that figure when it comes to the amount of money that's being allocated towards the police department versus the amount of money that could be taken from that police department and being, reallocated towards the community outreach programs, mental health assistance and support, or even to a lesser degree, obviously education too, which is a huge thing. And so that's something that always comes to mind ever since this whole term defund the police has come about. But obviously it's been tangled up and mixed in with a lot of different messages and a lot of different meanings to it. Everyone's taking from whatever it is they want to take from it versus what it actually is meaning. And so CNN has reported that it is talking about the reallocation of certain amount of money from the police departments onto the community. And so just to reiterate something, Alex, I definitely wanted to make sure that I make this clear that the premise of this episode is to help build that or bridge that gap between police officers and the Black community, because for too long it's been too much of a distrust and and just a dishonesty in general when it comes to the community as it pertains to the Black community and police officers. And we definitely want to. This is not about bashing police officers, not about bashing the community. This is about coming together and help resolving an issue that has been an issue for far too long. And so Chris was just reiterating that, obviously what comes to mind in his opinion about what defunding the police means and what law enforcement reform particularly means as well. And I definitely want to get your take on it too, Alex, as far as your take with what does defunding the police mean to you and what does law enforcement reform means when you hear those terms?
Well, to be honest, I'd never heard of defunding the police until the unrest, till the George Floyd murder. I'm like, what are they talking about? I'm hearing it at the protests, and I'm like, defund the police, abolish the police. So I'm like, let me just look it up. So once I dug deep into what the meaning of defunding police was, it was something that, okay, now I understand it's all about reallocating funds to certain issues within the inner city communities, which I'm all for. I'm all for funding, the inner city communities, especially, the south and west sides of Chicago. But I think it just gets away from the issue when they're talking about abolish the police and we don't need the police. And as you can see in Chicago, I mean, we're in a state of emergency with the amount of homicides and shootings that we have every single week. I mean, every day consistently. It's not even a weekend thing anymore. Like literally we have like 40 people shot on a Monday or 18 people murdered in one particular day. So it's not just a weekend thing. And I think as I read more about defunding the police, I agree with it because the past few years they've been putting so many more titles and responsibilities on police officers. Police are meant to just enforce the laws and, you know, respond to in progress emergencies and things of that nature. But now we have to specialize in mental health and then once we're called to a mental health call, it's not like, okay, he or she is on level 1. No, they're already on level 10 and hadn't had their medicine in months. So they're already in a state of, you know, a mental breakdown. So, and for police officers to have to respond to that and try to fix it within a few minutes, it can escalate, to deadly force because of the mental state that this person is in. But they add the mental health aspect on us. Then they close down something small as the pounds per animal. So now we have to be responsible for getting all the loose pit bulls off the streets, or dealing with now we're in the school, so now we have to deal with the juveniles. A lot of them have mental issues as well, in the Black communities, which is another issue that we don't talk about, is the lack of mental health that we have in our schools for our youth. So they added a lot more responsibility to the police officer, which it was never meant for us to handle. So I'm all for reallocating funds to those issues, just to, kind of take a lot of the issues that we're not really trained in off of our plate and have the professionals to deal with those situations. But then again, there's also another argument is, like they were saying, they want to have social workers and mental health professionals respond to these non-emergency calls. But you also have to think about it. Okay, now you're going to add that tool. So now this person has to go respond to this call. Mind you, police are going to have to respond with them to protect them as well. So now and then fire has to respond. So now you're really just adding, you're not taking the money away from CPD, you're just adding another element to it. So, I mean, I think we just need a lot more, need to do a lot more research on what is defunding the police, and does anyone have a plan too?
Yeah.
Like, what's the plan?
Yeah, I completely agree with that point. All those different points that you made, especially knowing that it hasn't been a clear-cut plan as to
Right.
what that all will entail, and
Mm-hmm.
It needs to, especially from these lawmakers and these politicians who are advocating for this to be the case, and obviously that they're getting the backlash from the court of public opinion, from those who are protesting and rioting and things of that nature, saying, hey, well, listen, we want justice for these particular murders. And obviously, to your point, with the recent events of the Breonna Taylor shooting, with the recent event of Ahmaud Arbery, to a lesser degree, who was killed by a former investigator here in Georgia, and even with George Floyd's case, there's been a lot of that talk, right? But it hasn't been a crystal clear plan that needs to be, brought out and displayed to everyone to say, hey, this is what this is going to consist of. And so my issue with that has been the fact that it's been a lot of talk, one person saying this, another person saying that, but it hasn't been nothing consistent. And so to your point about the mental health aspect, my first episode of this podcast was done a couple weeks ago. My wife and her coworker are actually licensed professional counselors in the mental health field. And they were talking about that. And we talked about just the everyday struggles of having to deal with this situation on top of this pandemic that we're all having to face in some type of capacity too. And so I asked, and I told them I definitely have them back on the show to kind of just have a part 2 of that, because I want to know some things as it pertains to law enforcement and just that mental health aspect of it. Because I know that officers, whenever they're involved in some type of shooting and it results to a fatality, they oftentimes get evaluated mentally. But I don't know if you guys can speak to that in detail, what that evaluation consists of, and what furthermore needs to happen in those evaluations. Because if a person just was involved in a shooting and then they have no emotions behind it, or they just, you know what, it was a clean shoot to me, but there was no definitive proof of that, and they just put it back on the streets. How can we truly say that we can trust that law enforcement will do their jobs in a most protective and serving way, when the basic elements or basic objective for a police officer is to serve and protect? Even if you don't do nothing else, those are the basic things that the bare minimum things that has to happen. And so, to your point, obviously reallocating those funds to those other avenues that would help de-escalate some of those situations where a person who was, dispatch is called or been called upon to, help this person with their mental health issues. I know police get asked to do a lot of things in one swoop, but that's not to say that they can't de-escalate situations from, letting it get further than what it was. And so everything doesn't have to be a deadly force. And even to that point about these protests has been happening with George Floyd's case. Think about it from this perspective. I'm going to speak in terms of the community's aspect of it. So with Breonna Taylor's situation, she died in March. We're still talking about arresting these officers who were responsible for a no-knock approach. They were given information late and they was given the wrong information late too, because that particular warrant was given to them after the fact that they had already caught the person they were looking for at the right location they were looking for him at. So for her to have been laying in the bed, sleep, and just no knock, just start shooting, that's ridiculous. And accountability has to be had. And so for me, defunding the police would also consist of those police officers who are involved in these type of shootings, and it's proven to be race related and racially biased, and just spewing that kind of hatred. I honestly feel like they need to be losing at least half of their pension or half of their retirement, because you're taking a life without any purpose, without any validity whatsoever for it, and you're not being held accountable for it. A lot of times we hear about situations where the officers are found not guilty because the district attorney's office, the judge, and the juries, for that matter, to a lesser degree, are all saying that, well, what did this person do versus what the officer did or didn't do to de-escalate the situation and even preventing it from getting to that point. And so for me, and I know, Alex, you and I have talked a few times about the situation that's going on in Chicago. And the funny thing about Chicago is that each and every one of us on this call is from Chicago. And so Chris can speak to his own experiences when it comes to just living in Chicago on an everyday basis. But obviously being a Baltimore police officer, he shares the sentiment with you in regards to those everyday homicides and situations that's going on in Chicago. And I want to make sure I'm clear too about this too, because obviously the two issues are mutually exclusive. So, and again, Alex, I've seen your posts about, just the situation that's been going on in Chicago and how you're calling for Black Lives Matter, to say something, to speak up about this too. And so I want to be clear about that as well and get your take on that before I even speak to what it is that you might be, kind of zoning in on, because there is a difference between Black Lives Matter and other organizations who are advocating for violence and gang violence to stop in the inner cities of our communities. So I definitely want you to speak on just your experience and what you feel that the Black Lives Matter movement should do as it pertains to these, inner city killings and shootings that's happening in our communities.
No, I agree with what you're saying. These two, I understand they are two totally different issues and they should be addressed accordingly. But my issue, and I'm very vocal about it, is the fact that only one of these issues are getting the energy that they deserve. And I mean, and this isn't new with children being shot in Chicago. I mean, it's just like deja vu. I remember a few years ago, it was the same situation. The summertime, I believe it was like 19 children who were shot in Chicago. Not as many have died as, recently. So I feel like it's just the same issues that we're having. And what's been going on in Chicago recently, it's been breaking records, like 60 to 100-year records as far as the violence and amount of people that are being shot and killed. And my only concern is the fact that as Black people, we're not having that same energy when it comes to us killing each other, or when a 1-year-old is shot and killed, and a 3-year-old is shot and killed, and a 10-year-old who's dancing for her mom is shot and killed inside the house. Like, we don't give those same cases the same amount of energy. They're not shutting down the West Side. They're not shutting down the South Side. They're not marching downtown for these young lives who were stolen. I mean, it was just a mass riot yesterday over the Columbus statue. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, and the politicians, they've been asking for the statue to be removed for years.
Yep.
And, you know, now you wait till it gets to this point where it's just mass chaos. And the current leadership now, they're not on top of it as they should be, you know, as far as like, you know, preventing these riots and looting and unrest, because they were looting again yesterday in downtown, and you know, mass chaos. So it's still going on. The riots and the unrest is still continuing in Chicago on a daily basis. So I mean, I support and I understand the fight for Black Lives Matter. And I have to be honest, I'm a little critical to other races who now decided in 2020 that Black Lives Matter. Like, it took you till 2020 to realize that Black Lives Matter. And then it's like a lot of other organizations and issues are jumping on the bandwagon. So it's like, okay, now it's like, it's a ride now. It's like you have your LGBT now. That's pretty much Black Lives Matter. It's all about Black trans lives matter. And I mean, it just took a turn somewhere, but I think we have to hold ourselves accountable as well for the situations that are going on in our communities. And I understand the systematic racism and the issues and the historical issues that we still have to dig deep and correct. But I mean, the way things are right now, I mean, we have to hold people accountable. We have to hold ourselves accountable. And as far as being in these communities, like, people talk, you know who shot this 1-year-old, you know who killed this 10-year-old. So we have to start holding each other accountable as well.
We do. And, you know, and to that point though, and I brought this up with Chris earlier about how the trust has to be there between the community and the police officers. Police oftentimes are saying, if you see something, say something, but even to basically piggyback off what I said earlier about the community having trust with the police, if the police won't say anything about the bad cops, then how can you trust us as community members to say something about what's going on?
I have to ask, because I've heard that a lot, that good cops aren't saying anything about bad cops. What exactly do you think we're seeing on the street?
Right.
Do you think these officers are showing up all with like Confederate flags and hoods? I mean, if you know you're, like, not even just from police work, just think about your own job. If somebody knows they're working with somebody who they can't trust not to turn them in, won't you be on your best behavior when you're around those officers?
That's very valid
my
point.
department is a lot smaller than Chicago, but we still have 2,000 officers running around. I mean, do people think I know each officer individually? Like, we answer more than 1 million calls for service every year. Do you think I'm at every call? Like, I don't understand where that came from, that good cops aren't saying anything against bad cops.
And you know, and to that point too, obviously, I'm not necessarily saying that every cop knows every cop, right? So understanding that this fraternity, sorority that you guys are in, it consists of thousands of officers, you know, throughout the city, throughout the counties that you all are residing in. So you're not going to know everyone. But I know to a lesser degree that there's been situations where, let's say, a good cop is assigned to being partnered up with a bad one, or not necessarily a bad one. I don't want to like necessarily label them as those things, but you know what the intents of a person is based on your interactions with them and just based on your overall talk sometimes. And sometimes a lot of them are really very, very good at hiding those intents as far as their racial beliefs or that white supremacy just views they have about, you know, being able to have a badge on and a gun and say, okay, well, I'm the authority, so you're going to do what I tell you to do, or else. And so for this situation to keep escalating to what it was, that's been the most alarming thing, right? So we know that there are great cops like you and Alex both who are making a difference and making immediate impacts in the community, who are trying to de-escalate these situations from getting further than where they are. But that's not saying enough when there are so many other police officers who just, I just saw in New York, there were some police officers who had T-shirts on that were basically mocking the idea that I can't breathe by wearing a shirt that says I can breathe. And they were happy and smiling about that. I found it to be very offensive and insensitive, despite what was going on in the situation that happened with George Floyd in Minnesota. That was completely out of line and just insensitive for the fact that this cop sat 8 minutes and 46 seconds on this man's neck. And not only that, what made it worse was the cops behind the car that was holding on to his arms and legs just so he would move. That makes it worse. So it ain't just the act itself, but it's the involvement of which the other officers had when it came down to this man's last bit of life that he had left, calling for his mother, and just hoping that someone would say something and be like, hey, okay, get off him. And even to you and I talked about this before, Chris, about how you've told officers, say, hey, take a walk. I'll take it from here. You know what I mean? That needs to happen much more on a consistent basis in order for things to not escalate further than where it is. Because just like you guys want to go home safe and sound to your families and things of that nature, the community wants to go home to their homes and families too. And that has to be consistent with both sides. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, you're going to say something to that point, Alex, about it.
Yeah, as far as the stepping up and calling out the bad cops, like Chris was saying, we don't know all cops, and yeah. I've been an officer for 7.5 years, and I've seen the department, I've seen it change, and it's continuing to change. And you mentioned police reform, and we're going through police reform. We have been going through reform for the past few years now with the federal consent decree. And I had a conversation with my cousin who lives in the South, and she listed 8 things that needs to happen, that needs to be reformed in police departments across the country. And I'm like, I'm reading the 8 things. I'm like, we're there. We already, chokeholds are banned, have always been banned. We have de-escalation training, just all these issues that she wanted to be addressed. I'm like, what are you talking about? This has been the case for years. And she brought it to my attention that, well, no, and in the departments down south, a lot of these issues aren't addressed. So then that had me thinking, I can't think of every department as Chicago. We're a big department, and usually the bigger departments are the ones to start the change first. So as far as the police reform, Chicago is going through it now. We're in a federal consent decree. So I don't believe there's going to be any defunding of Chicago Police Department at least until we're done with this consent decree, where they're going to need to hire more officers, and the money that's going into Chicago, that's before the whole leadership change, before the new mayor and the new suit came, Chicago 3 years in a row had a decline in crime and shootings. 3 years in a row, and that was due to modern technology, like ShotSpotter. And are you aware of ShotSpotter?
I've heard of it.
Yeah, so it's just the technology.
Here in Baltimore.
Right. So if someone's shooting, on 51st and Racine 20 times, we get it instantly as it's happening. So then we respond a lot quicker. We, possibly catch the offender a lot quicker on scene as they're doing the shooting. So all this technology that's coming into the city now, it costs more and more money, but it's helping with the crime. So as far as Chicago's police reform, we're in the middle of reforming the department, and it's going to take years to even meet all the criteria for the federal consent decree. So I'm not aware of any other departments who are New York, I think they're actively starting to pull money away. But at what point do we say, okay, we're going to pull this money away, but we're risking the safety and livelihood of all these law-abiding citizens now? So at what point do we draw the line? Because, okay, they took all that money from New York and crime is skyrocketing. Chicago, because of the anti-police culture right now, a lot of officers are second guessing themselves and not doing as many stops, because it's like, oh, if I stop this car, or if I stop this person, I could be the next person on YouTube, or the next person to get stripped, or this or that, for a split-second decision. So a lot of people aren't actively policing right now because of everything that's going on. So, but that's also causing the rise in crime. So,
It
at
is.
what point do we kind of like draw the line to be like, okay, let the police do their job? Like, I mean, I don't know every cop here. I haven't encountered any like racist, white supremacist police officers on the department. I'm not saying that they're probably there hidden, you know. And I do believe what happened with George Floyd. If there are a lot of undercover white supremacist police officers, they're gonna think twice now. They're gonna like that. I believe that situation has changed. I mean, you have to be crazy to not, if you are that particular officer who was like a hidden racist or whatever. You know what happened to him? You know, George Floyd has made an impact, you know, across departments.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate too that it took a pandemic for the world to see exactly
Mm-hmm.
what we've been trying to get them to see all along, right? So I want to also make this clear too, Alex. This is an unfiltered podcast, so feel
Mm-hmm.
free to express your concerns and vent however the hell way you do it. Ain't no censoring
Yeah.
on this damn show.
Okay.
So yeah, but even to that point though, it's just it saddens me to know, and you would think that some of these white supremacist officers would like, you know what, I'll think twice about doing it. No, some of them are still outright doing this shit, and that's
Mm-hmm.
the problem. It's like accountability. They already know I can do this, and I'm only going to get desk duty, or I'm only going to get administrative leave, versus eventually down the line I'll get fired, but I'll still get my pension. So that's the thing that needs to happen. In order for situations like this to really be affected, we need to affect them in their pockets. If you're willing to put your racist views and white supremacist beliefs in the forefront of you doing your job as a law enforcing officer, then guess what? You don't deserve your pension. You don't deserve your retirement. I don't feel sorry for any racists that's been losing their jobs and losing the ability to provide for their families, because you're sitting here, you're making that choice. You made the choice to say, hey, white supremacy is over every damn thing. So regardless of what my job says, I'm going to take it upon my hands to be a vigilante in this way and be an advocate for my white supremacists and KKK members or whatever the hell, because it's over 700 radical groups of white supremacists and neo-Nazi folks or whatever. They all out here in different, they're dressed in different occupations. It's not just the law enforcement. It's
Mm-hmm.
lawyers, it's doctors, it's teachers to a lesser degree. And so for them to be outed now more so than ever, this is indeed the time to be outing these people, because now we're seeing, everyone is seeing now in real time exactly what the hell's been happening. And my whole thing about it is, well, what the fuck took you so damn long to see this shit? You think we've been making this shit up? This ain't been a lie. We've been telling you all that unarmed black men and women have been killed at the hands of police officers with no causes associated with those to even what's the word I'm looking for, to even validate and confirm as to justify why they even did this in the first place. When things could have de-escalated a long time ago, it could have been a situation where, hey, listen, I'm just here to answer questions, or here to ask you questions. I'm not here to do anything. And obviously, to that point, community members we have to be respectful to law enforcement too. And I don't want to abolish law enforcement, because we still need the law. We still need cops around to patrol and making sure that we're all safe. But the safety have to be consistent with everyone across the board. It can't just be the white and wealthy folks or the black well-off folks. It has to be all of us. It can't just include one group of people. And so I want to read something to you all as far as the budgets go when it comes to New York PD, LAPD, and Chicago PD. New York PD gets $5.6 billion. LAPD gets $1.73 billion. Chicago is at $1.6 billion. That you're talking about billions of dollars being allocated to police departments, when we're seeing that a lot of these police departments, not all of them, more some than others, are having situations where their body cameras are being turned off, their dash cams being turned off, and now the prosecutors or district attorneys or whatever only have their word to go off what actually happened. Well, I was fearful of my life, but you don't have definitive proof of that shit. You sit up here turning your body camera off and I feel like in my heart of hearts, when you turn your body camera off, there should be an automatic termination, because you're sitting up here hiding evidence to prove your side and the other side of the persons who you're pulling over or who you're talking to. And that can't happen. We taxpaying citizens have paid money towards these departments to have those body cameras, not just for your safety, but for the safety of the civilians too. And if you can't sit up here and provide that to us, then why the hell are we sitting up here paying taxes on these dash cameras and body cameras for that matter? That's unfair. And so that needs to be taken into consideration when you talk about accountability from that standpoint. And so I want to read something real quick before you give your take on this too, Chris. Let me see where this comes from. CNN actually reported people shot to death by U.S. police officers by race between 2017 and 2020. Sadly, the trend of fatal shootings in the U.S. seems to only be increasing, with a total of 506 civilians having been shot, 105 of whom were Black as of the month of June, as of June 30th, 2020. That was just last month. In 2018, there were 996 fatal police shootings. And in 2019, this figure increased to 1,004. Additionally, the rate of fatal police shootings among Black Americans was much higher than that of any other ethnicity, standing at 31 fatal shootings per million of the population as of June of 2020. Now, I need to know from you all. I'm gonna start with you first, Alex, on that. What do you say to that stat?
See, I would have to like really dig into those numbers because, like I mentioned to you, I can only speak for Chicago because that's the only. I mean, this is what I have experienced in. I've lived here my entire life, and I mean, I'm just trying to find the numbers. Like as of right now, we're at 414 homicides, 2,078 people shot, and I mean, you know, we still have half a year to go. And then as far as police involved shootings for this year right now, we're at 4 police involved shootings. 2019 there was only 6, no, there was 12 police involved shootings, 2018 15, and 2017 12. And all these stats are, I mean, if you go on Hey Jackass, you know, they break it down to like, you know, all the numbers, the shootings and the locations. So to me, when I have conversations about police involved shootings, and to me, I feel like the media and everyone's putting out there like police are just out there like vigilantes, like just shooting everyone, killing everybody, killing the kids. Like, oh, I'm afraid my son's gonna get killed by a police officer like every day, and that's not the case. That's not our issue right now in Chicago. It's just not. Like, it's in the South and West Side. It's a big drug and gang issue, right? You know, it's like this way since the beginning of the time. And it's not the police out here doing these shootings. It's our own communities. It's our own brown communities, Black communities, the South and West Side communities, our own communities. And I think we really need to like focus on this issue right now. And I understand you know, police involved shootings, and to just comment on what you were saying about the body cams. You know, I wore a body cam when they first came out, and at first everyone's hesitant, like, because you know you will get in trouble if you activate your camera whenever you're involved when you're encountering a citizen or a call. But eventually, everyone loves the body cams because they help us. Like, they help us in court cases. They help us to you know, write our reports and everything and get everything together. But they actually have helped in more situations where people are trying to accuse officers of police brutality, and it's like, no, we have the body cam. So I really think departments should start releasing all the body cams, so the public can see and get a full picture of what's going on and what officers are dealing with on a daily basis. Like, I mean, shoot, yesterday officers was having M80s thrown at them, fireworks thrown at them, pits, frozen water bottles. They were making cement cups and throwing them. So it's like, release all the body cams, not just the ones where the media is going to get the hot story at the time. Release everything, and where people can just go click, oh, let me just see this video, let me see this video, and see what police officers are encountering every single day. And I try not to Monday night quarterback every police video that's on social media. I mean, I have
Yeah.
a lot of friends who like, my police friends, what you think of this? What you think of that? I'm like, I was in a whole nother city. Like, I don't know their policies and procedures. And no one's gonna post the entire video. People are gonna
Yeah.
post the clips where they're the victims and they get people on their side. They're not gonna post what happened before and after. So I get a lot of that, like, people asking me to, what do you think about this video? I'm like, well, I need to see the whole video. And I don't know every department's policies and procedures on how they discipline their officers. But I mean, what do you think, Chris?
Yeah, Chris, I was going to ask you that too. And just to make it clear, I want to make sure I'm clear about this. The statistics that I just read actually from a U.S. standpoint. It wasn't zoning in on one particular city or state. And so that was from the U.S. standpoint.
Okay.
And so, Chris, what are your thoughts on that? What do you say to that?
Again, well, like Alex just said, I can only speak for Baltimore. Like you said, Chicago is in a consent decree. Baltimore started our consent decree back in 2016 after the Freddie Gray incident. For our city, police-involved shootings have gone down. But as you pointed out, we still are facing, this will be the third, fourth year now, this year in a row, that we've had homicides over 350. Because we're on track now to break yet another record. That I can't speak to what the numbers for police involved shootings, because like Alex said, one, the entire video is never going to be released. Two, not every aspect of the case is going to be released, because no city can do that, because they still have to be able to get a non-biased jury. So you'll never see a case where every bit of evidence is laid out in the news, because then you can't get a jury who can look objectively at that.
But even to that,
I don't know how I can answer the question.
Yeah, and even to that point, Chris, obviously we all understand that not every bit of evidence can be presented to the public. But when the public gets a glimpse of what took place, and the media does have a huge knack for control of the narrative when they put out just that soundbite or just that little snippet of that video to show exactly what the police did wrong in that particular regard. But understanding that the investigation is still pending, so a lot of those situations won't show you all the evidence. But when some of the evidence is blatant and right there in your face, it's like, well, what the hell? How much more investigating do you have to do?
You can't say that it's blatant when you haven't seen the whole thing. When if the average call lasts for 5, 6, maybe up to 10 minutes, but then you get a video where it's only 30 seconds out of 6 minutes. How can you say anything is cut and dry and out of 30 seconds out of a 6 or 10 minute encounter? It's just like you can't really. You always have to be able to. I understand, sudden. Like, oh, okay, this was wrong, but you have to be able to say, okay, well, barring any other evidence coming forward, it's just like that. It can't be a cut and dry situation. So you're only seeing the very smallest snippet of a much larger incident, and like 10 minutes can be a long time, or can lead to a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it can. And I want to get your thoughts on this too, because I mean, Alex mentioned something about everyone, for the most part in Chicago, are receptive to the body camera aspect of it. But when we see in situations where police officers are deliberately turning off their cameras, now, me being an analyst guy, I understand in each and every equipment, there's a serial number, there's a barcode, there's a way to track those devices, right? So whenever dispatch or whoever's in charge sees that someone has turned their body camera off, it should be a notification to them saying, hey, your body camera's off, you need to turn that back on.
Like I said, we don't have that capability in Baltimore. You can't just pull up, there's no screen we can go to and just see who's turned off and turned on their camera. Usually what we have to do is, once our investigators are looking into it, they look at all the officers who have called 1023 there, or who have said that they are on scene. I forgot. I'm sorry, I might slip into 10 codes every once in a while. But they look and see who's all there, and then they look at everybody else's camera, and they're like, oh, okay, so there's Chris, or they're looking at Chris's camera, they'll say, oh, okay, well, Alex was on scene and Joey was on scene. Let's go pull their camera. And then they pull their camera, like, oh, wait a minute, why is it 15 minutes of video footage on Alex and Joey's camera, but only 5 minutes of footage on Chris's? And that's how those investigations get started. Like I said, I don't know about Chicago because I know it's a better funded department than we are, but we don't have a master screen where we can just say, oh, wait a minute, somebody just turned off their camera. What's going on?
Yeah,
like
but that should be something that every department looks into, because obviously that will come in handy when in terms of doing that investigation. Like, okay, we saw that at 10:14 this person's body camera was off until 11:35 or something like that, and that kind of data is out, it's there, and it's available to have if obviously the right funding and the right amount of money is being allocated towards that specifically. But that needs to be something that's consistently investigated and delved into to see how we can best assist that issue, because no one should be just turning it off.
To that point, there's so many things that need to be updated before we even get to something like that. Like, I'll give you an example. When I first got hired by Baltimore police, I came on, they were showing us our computer system. And they kept telling us about this Lotus Notes program where all these documents get put in for investigations. So I was thinking to myself, oh, Lotus Notes must just be so new, I've never heard of it, even though I consider myself, moderately computer savvy. So when I get home and look it up, Lotus Notes was new and exciting back when I was born in 1985. We're using 30-year-old equipment that, like, they don't even manufacture these programs anymore. But we're trying to make it work in a 2018 department, or a 2020 department now. Like, they just now announced that we're getting rid of Lotus Notes. We still handwrite reports. We still handwrite traffic tickets, even though almost every other department has gone digital. So, like I said, the fact that we can use body cameras and it's not causing our 50-year-old computer servers downtown to explode is already like an amazing feat.
Yeah.
So as far as Chicago's body cams, they're a lot more advanced. They just rolled out some new features on the cameras maybe a few months ago where, I mean, your cameras, everyone has a dock, like, this is my badge number, this is my dock for my camera. And so prior to this, the new features, once you activate, it'll go back 30 seconds. But now they have it where once you activate your camera, it'll go back 2 minutes to, whatever. So your camera's always on, it's always buffering, it's always recording. Yeah. So now, because when you get out the car, like if it was a split second to see, or you armed, you're shooting, you get out and you react or whatever, and you hurry up and turn it on. Now it's gonna catch that 2 minutes prior to, so you'll get more of, okay, what happened before you activated your camera? What were you doing before you activated your camera? And also another feature was added where supervisors can just log into and view, see what you guys are doing from your body cam. So it's similar to what you were talking about. Like, can someone, can they just, okay, let me see what Alex and her partner are doing. And they can, go into our body cam and see where we're at, what we're doing, or review our jobs prior to. And also, like you mentioned, if, people are cutting off their cameras, so what are they doing between this period and that period? And all they have to do is match up, okay, were you on a call at that time? So then it becomes an issue, like, why was your camera off for an hour and you were given like 2-3 jobs? So what was going on? But if you weren't given any jobs, then maybe you went to the bathroom, cut it off, and then just forgot to cut it back on when you, when you came back out the bathroom. Because they want you to keep it on in the bathroom. And I'm like, no, I always cut it off.
That's pretty abrasive. And
right.
That's a little bit too much information that people want to see. But there should be a way to, obviously, again, being a technology guy, I can speak to this as far as the technical side of it. And so if the camera is off, there should be like a buzzing notification that comes in through that camera and said, okay, all right, turn it back on. It's been X amount of time, you need to turn this back on. And so from that standpoint, that's something that obviously each and every one of these departments need to look into as far as putting funding towards that to make sure that they're not only just protecting their officers who they want to keep on the job, but they're protecting the citizens as well. If they get a call and they're looking to apprehend a suspect, or they're looking to question someone in some type of situation that happened in the community, that needs to all be taken into account, as well as the dash cam too. We can't keep having situations where, well, this camera was turned off. Okay, well, that's an automatic termination to my estimate, and it should be everywhere. I don't care what different departments do what. Every department needs to be consistent and monolithic when it comes to how you handle an officer, involved in a shooting, and they so happen to not have their body cameras on. Like, no, because now the story's not adding up. And so a situation that happened here in Atlanta during a protest where there were 6 officers who were fired for apprehending 2 individuals, a young black man and a young black lady in a car. They were obviously, the curfew was put in order by the mayor. And so they were driving through the city downtown of Atlanta to get home. And they were both college students. One went to Morehouse, one goes to Clark, or Spelman, I believe. And they were taken out of the car, roughly, just aggressively rough-handled and slammed. And one person used a taser on the young man. And one of the officers who was fired said that, oh, he was waving a gun at us, but his camera was off. It's like, wait, what? That don't even make sense. Like, well, what were the other cameras around you showing? What did that see? And we saw on CNN being reported that there was no gun found. There was no gun being waved. No one was saying any explicitives to the officers or whatsoever. And so they were just trying to get home. And so for them, being apprehended and taken out of their cars the way they were, and they weren't involved in any riots or looting or anything like that, that was just completely wrong on so many different levels. And so those police officers were fired here in Atlanta, and you had other officers not being hesitant to want to even respond to any calls for that. And even just in Buffalo, the protest that happened, and I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with this situation, but it was a protest that happened where a 75-year-old man was pushed to the ground by a Buffalo police officer and had a big gash on his head. He could have died from that fall alone. And the video showed that no officers that came through even tried to even assist him in any medical way whatsoever. And so 60 officers quit in the Buffalo PD because they were basically saying that, oh, you're holding this police officer or these police officers responsible for what happened to this protester. That protester posed no threat whatsoever, but yet he's gushing with blood coming out of his skull on the ground, 75 years old. Like, what was the point of that? That made entirely no sense at all.
But I actually did see to the incident you're talking about. The mayor came out and said, when you watch their full camera, they told that man to leave that scene multiple times, and he was being very combative with them. And they gave him a shove to get him moving. But he did lose his footing and he fell, which is tragic. But they did actually tell him, no, you have to leave this area. They gave him multiple warnings and told him force will be used. And he still chose to stay in that location. Like, at a certain point, we try to give people, like, I know I try to give people, as much time to comply as possible. But at a certain point, if I'm telling you, you have to leave this area and force will be used to make you clear this area, force is going to be used to clear the area. It's not something that's up for debate after a little while. I'm telling you, you have to move, you have to move.
Yeah, but even to that point, Chris, a 70
and like they didn't quit the department.
Don't pose any threat whatsoever. Does that have to be?
Yeah, but those departments, and also you said those officers quit the department. They didn't quit the department. They quit that one unit because that unit was given those orders. Hey, make these people move by any means necessary. And then when it looked bad on the camera, they were thrown to the wolves. So wait a minute, you told us we were only doing what you told us to do. And now you're throwing us to the wolves. Well, screw it. We're not going to be part of this unit. There's still officers in the department. It was just the issue became, you're going to punish me for doing something that you gave the order to do.
Yeah, and we know from a political standpoint, there's going to always be a time where they save face, right? And because the court of public opinion is going to always push for that type of, reprimand, if you will, to come down hard on that particular officer or those officers involved in situations like that. And so they want to make sure they save their jobs or save their seats and whatever political power they have and want to get reelected. So yeah, those type of things often happens all the time. It's a bait and switch that happens too damn long, if you ask me. But yeah, even to that point though, he's 75 years old. He poses no threat, Chris. You can grab the man and push him to the side, or pull him to the side and obviously get him out the way. But that excessive force, that was unnecessary. He's 75. He has no weapon. He poses no threat. It was hundreds of those officers marching down that street, and to push him, and
they still had areas there.
Yeah, to not only push him, but then don't even administer any type of medical assistance whatsoever. It's like, you're gonna leave him there, like that's inhumane. And so from that standpoint, I find that to be egregious and just totally out of bounds when you think about it from the scope of things. He's 75 years old. He's not posing any threat to anyone. He's actually just exercising his right as a citizen to protest. Now, I get that he has to clear the area, but there's more ways to get into a house than the front door, right? So, I mean, that has to be something to consider from a logical standpoint. Even as an officer, you still have to have that humanity kick in, that common sense to say, you know what, there's a way for me to de-escalate this without having used excessive force in some of these situations. Everything doesn't have to result into excessive force. Now, some things are pretty evident that it needs to be excessively forced, but some things is like, you know what, this is not an issue that I can just say I want to speak about in terms of it being for the sake of me keeping my job. And so from that standpoint, I understand their frustrations with not wanting to, work for that unit anymore, especially given that the higher ups told them to do that, but then only turned around and said, well, we got to let you go. Well, we did what the hell you asked us to do. And so from that, systemically, that needs to also be taken into account too. A lot of these issues are coming down, it's trickling down from the top down, and the top needs to be more so held accountable than the actual the foot soldiers, if you will, who are actually out here in the trenches doing these different things. And so I want to get your opinion on that too, Alex, because that's a lot.
Well, just to piggyback off your last comment, as far as like, it's coming from the top, and that's been my biggest issue, is the fact that because we always hear this same thing, like, how can we bridge the gap with police in the community? And my same argument is that that's never going to happen until we fix what's within this department, within City Hall, because I'm like, there's no trust with the officers on the ground and the brass, and then the mayor. It's too many politics in it, and especially for our Chicago mayor, she incites a lot of the anti-police culture here, and I mean, and I understand she wants to hold police accountable, and I understand that pretty much her entire background has been on the Chicago Police Board and punishing officers for use of force. So that's kind of what she knows, and that's what she's gravitated toward as she's been in office, is really trying to reform this police department. Yeah. But at the same time, behind closed doors, you like, okay, do what y'all got to do, like, we got to get the city back and this and that. But okay, then once there's a video out of an officer smacking the hell out of somebody, now you're like, oh, I ain't tell you to do that. So now you're just going to be throwing officers under the bus. You're telling us to do our job. And I'm not saying go out there and use excessive force, but force is going to be needed in certain situations if someone is throwing a brick at your head. So, so I think in order for us to truly bridge that gap with the community, is we have to fix what's wrong within the department, because there's no trust in the department. Yeah, from the I say blue shirts, which is us, the police officers, with the white shirts, the brass, and City Hall. Like, there's absolutely no trust. The morale in policing is at an all-time low. So you take all these broken officers who like, all messed up, because they're like, the anxiety that I think every police officer dealt with during this unrest, is like, it takes a toll on you. Like, I mean, I've never felt that amount of anxiety, my 7 years on the job. And I talk to people with 20 years on the job, and it's like, we've never seen this happen before. We've never seen police cars burned, she's the first mayor to ever lose downtown. And, you know, just growing up in Chicago, that was one thing you never did as the mayor. You do not lose downtown.
Absolutely.
And then after she lost downtown, then the South and the West side, I mean, then the rest of the city was up for grabs. And I know a lot of people like to say like, oh, it's just material stuff. But I mean, I don't know how it was in Atlanta and Baltimore, but to be driving home and just looking at it, it was heartbreaking. It was like, you know,
Oh, it happened here too.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like, damn, like we really just tore our shit up, you know. And then
Yeah.
it's like, it's sad because, you know, and then you also, I listened to an alderman's call, you know, in my district. She was like crying because she worked years and years and years to get businesses into these communities for jobs and for, you know, to help small mom and pop business just to go, you know, just to be burned down. And I think first, before we can bridge the gap with the community and build that trust, that we first have to bridge this gap within the departments to build that trust. Like, I know you're gonna have my back. We're doing our jobs. We're doing everything by the book. You tell us to wear, you know, a body cam, a body mic, all this, you know, who knows in the long run what all this radiation on our bodies gonna do to police officers 10, 50 years from now. I guess we'll find out. But
it takes a mental toll. I mean, it's a mental toll on all of us as civilians, as well as you guys as police officers, to
especially
have to deal with
Black
so
police
much of
officers.
that. Yeah, and
It's a whole
that's the
nother
main reason.
element. You know, a whole nother
that's the main,
element.
because I want to know from your personal views of how Black people have been treated in this country, or in this world for that matter, when it comes to the hands of law enforcement. Because there has to be, listen, before Rodney King, there was slave patrol, and we and Chris and I talked about this a little while before you joined on, with how the northern police officers, obviously New York being one of the oldest, if not the oldest, police department ever founded, the whole premise behind them being founded was to protect, you know, properties and businesses, things of that nature. Versus here in the South, the main reason for police was slave patrol. It was to find lost slaves or abandoned slaves, or slaves who were just drifted off entirely too far away from their plantation, and saying, okay, boy, where you going? Why are you off here in these woods? And so the system itself was never fully designed, especially from a Southern standpoint, from a Confederate standpoint, it was never fully designed to even incorporate us as human beings to serve and protect. It was more so of serving the masters and protecting them, and making sure that we stayed in line and we stayed intact with whatever it is they told us to do. And if we didn't do that, we were killed, we were hung, we were murdered, all kind of ways. And that has trickled down to the 21st century. We're still dealing with a lot of these different issues. The Rodney King beating, it was only 20, 30 years ago. And so when you think about that, and then we think about situations that happened with, even the situation to a lesser degree with Ahmaud Arbery's situation, that was a former investigator who him and his son killed just for, you know, jogging. And then the camera that was inside the house that Ahmaud Arbery went into, he was just looking around. How many times have people have just done that outside of being Black? Other races have just looked around other establishments. I know before me and my wife bought our house, we actually looked at the house first just to look around and see what it looks like, looking at the neighborhood, scoping the neighborhood out, see if it's a nice looking neighborhood, safe, good stuff. Nothing happened to us. But I can't tell you all, being a 6'4", 230-pound Black man, the average cop in Atlanta is about 5'9", 5'10". I'm already a threat to him, because he has to look up at me. I don't pose no threat. I'm not gonna be irate. I'm not gonna get ignorant and you know, just, I'm not gonna cause anything to happen more than what needs to happen, because I want to get home to my family too. But the situation with Rayshard Brooks here in Atlanta, he was obviously cognizant enough to speak to the police officers as politely and peacefully as possible, but yet he still winded up, you know, ended up dead. I've seen situations where other like white people who would have machete swords and wrestling with the police, or have a gun pointing at the police, nothing happens to them. Why the hell is it that it's so hard to just say, hey, can you just stop killing us? But it's like, no, but what? Ain't shit to even discuss or even talk about. We just want equality, and we want it to be fair across the board. If you're going to be physically aggressive with us, it needs to be consistent with every damn body else. Don't tell me you're going to sit up here and just slam hole and choke hole and put a knee on my neck, but yet Dylan Roof in South Carolina gets to be taken to fucking Burger King after killing 9 people in a damn church. With a bulletproof vest on at that. That doesn't make sense to me. And it don't make sense to a lot of people to a lesser degree. And so we want to understand how I understand this too from a
You're
dividing
combining
standpoint.
you're combining too many different aspects of it. You're going from South Carolina to Georgia. It's a whole different
Yeah,
situation.
but I'm just
The guy
highlighting the
was
fact
taken.
that this is
Hold on,
not the
hold on.
United
The
States.
guy in South
This is the
Carolina was
divided
taken
states of
alive
America.
because he turned himself in. He turned himself in. That was why he was taken alive. He didn't get into a shootout with police. He didn't get into a fight with police. Now, I'm not saying that, like, you'll never hear me say that there aren't instances of excessive force, but like I said, when you start reaching across whole countries, you have to look at, there's no one standard, and to be honest, I don't think it'll be possible to have one standard for use of force just because there are tens of thousands of officers that can across thousands of agencies. How can you like, get that kind of oneness? It's not gonna be a possibility. But like I said, my only issue with that is, like I said, people are reaching across this many areas and then trying to make everything one size fits all. One incident isn't the same as another. Like, one officer isn't the same as another. Like, maybe like one officer has a better skill set. Like, I've been fortunate. I've been able to talk myself out of a lot of situations that could have easily been escalated more. But, I can't say, oh, well, because I did it. The question becomes and stuff like that is, was it within policy and within law? Like, that's really basically the only thing you can really start asking the questions of. Now, in the cases where, white people were arresting an officer, but they didn't get shot, the question becomes, well, would it have been justifiable if they shot that white person? Yes. Man, because he didn't, and they were still able to get into control, does it automatically mean that somebody else who gets into like the same situation but happens to be with a black person and they end up in a shooting, does it automatically mean that that was a racist issue, or automatically, oh, well, he was just looking to shoot somebody? No, you can't dictate that because you don't know different people's skill sets. You don't know different people's abilities. Even with training, you don't know how people are going to react to situations like that until they're in them. It's a hard thing to be involved in because everybody wants to say, oh no, I'm going to handle this is how I handle it. This is how I handle it. But it's like Mike Tyson used to say, everybody has a plan until they get hit.
Yeah.
It's hard to determine or build into somebody how they're going to react in a situation like that. And I'm not trying to excuse anybody's excessive use of whatever, but like that, we can't just, from just watching from the screen, oh, well, 3 years ago in this city, this person had the same thing and they were able to just fight without shooting. So he should have been able to do the same thing. Well, that's not really how that can work.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that point up about training, because you brought up my next point that I was going to bring up to you guys. So I want to read something real quick to.
And just to let you know, I only got like 15 minutes left before I got to get ready for work.
Okay, most definitely. So the Atlantic.com reported that from a training aspect, abolishing a police force is one challenge. Replacing it with something better is another. Key to that challenge is revamping the training for prospective officers. Here, too, the U.S. can look to other countries for inspiration. In Germany, for example, police recruits are required to spend 2.5 to 4 years in basic training to become an officer, with the option to pursue the equivalence of a bachelor's or master's degree in policing. Basic training in the U.S., by comparison, can take as little as 21 weeks or 31.5 weeks with field training. The less time recruits have to train, the less time is afforded for guidance in crisis intervention, de-escalation. If you only have 21 weeks of classroom training, naturally you're going to emphasize survival. Paul Hirschfeld is an associate professor for sociology and criminal justice at Rutgers University, says this. Now, to that point, I want to say to you all, what are your thoughts on just the adequate amount of training and the lengthiness of the training as it pertains to being a police officer? Do you guys think that it should be more or less? How do you guys view it in comparison to other countries that seem to have a better handle on their policing in terms of their civilians than the U.S. has had in recent years?
I'll go first. So I definitely think that we need more training, and I think currently the current climate with a people wanting to sue. I don't know what the issue is, but the academy has been super watered down. Like our train, you know, when I went through the academy, you know, I have family who's on the department, you know, 15 years plus, and they were like, oh, you know, they preparing me mentally. Like, you know, when I was in the academy, it was rough. Like, you know, they didn't take no shit. Like, you're gonna be, you know, you gonna go through it with, you know, you'll be able to survive, but it's gonna be tough. So when I got in the academy, you know, I'm ready. I'm like, I've been working out, you know, mentally, they're gonna be yelling, screaming, whatever. And it was okay. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't tough. You know, I breezed through it. And so it was a breeze for me. And now going through it, I mean, now looking at the recruits, they're doing yoga. Like, bro, you're doing yoga in academy, like, okay, in Inglewood, them motherfuckers, they ain't doing yoga. Like, when you get into a situation, are you gonna be able to handle yourself? And a lot of them, you know, they go through the academy, and I've seen a lot of new recruits come out, and I'm like, oh my God, like, did you pay attention at all? And we had an incident in Chicago, and I'm assuming, you know, I don't want to put race on it, but I'm assuming because the officers were black and blow up as it would have if it was two white officers. It was a shooting, and these were two fairly new officers. And you would think, being at the academy, you
Chris, are you there?
shape, you know, because you're straight out of the academy, and on the train or whatever, crossing between the tracks or whatever. And you know, he's resisting. But did you see the video? Did you guys see the video?
I haven't seen the recent video yet, but someone
but
told me about it. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're trying to get him in cuffs, and he's resisting, but it never reached to the point where you had to use deadly force. And one officer's like, shoot him. And then and so in the video, I'm like, damn, is he telling him, like, shoot him with the gun or the taser? And then he's like, you know, he's telling his partner to shoot him. She's like, I'm gonna shoot you. And then the guy's like, no, don't do that. And then she shoots the man. Like, and then she shoots him in the, like, torso area. He makes it to run up the escalator, then she shoots him in the ass. So it's like, you know, you just got out the academy. Like, where on the use of force policy is that? So, like, the train, like, I blame the academy. Like, they watered down this training, and if you try to fire one of them, they're just gonna sue. So I guess, you know, since the academy, you know, the department doesn't want to get sued, they're just gonna pass everyone. And you have to be able to, you have to pass the fight. You know, there's a firearms, there's a law, there's the physical aspect of it, the mental aspect. You have to pass all these courses within what, maybe 6 months. Like, literally, you basically learn a law. You're shooting.
That's a lot to learn in 6 months.
In 6 months. And report writing, and de-escalation tactics, and active shooter training, because, you know, active shooters in schools has gone up in the U.S. You got to go through that training, clearing rooms, like when you go into a house, domestic, so you have to do scenario training. How can you squish all of that training within a 6 month period? Probably like 5 months, and then, you know, that last month, you know, you're chilling. But 6 months, 6 to 8 months, I think the academy is supposed to be, and then 3 months field training. But I definitely think that, I mean, we would benefit more from more training. And a lot of times our training consists of e-learning. You just go on and, you know, you're like, oh yeah, I finished. I'm trained in, you know, whatever the new training is, the new cannabis law. All right, I'm trained, you know. So it's just like a lot of e-learning. So I think we would benefit a lot from more training and more hands-on training, more scenario-based training when it comes to dealing with mentals or high stress situations, you know, you know, so in my opinion, yeah, I think we definitely need more training. I think the academy should be a lot longer, and I think the mental evaluation should be,
Needs to be thorough.
yeah, because I mean, in any profession, like you always see somebody like, how the hell did you pass the mental part? You know, like who let you on the job? So it's just
Yeah.
like you see people, and I've known a few people too who have gotten fired because of they were mentally unstable, you know, people, and it's like because I think the mental evaluation was like you answer, you know, those like 400 questions, like
That
do you
questionnaire,
agree,
yeah.
disagree, and then you meet
Yeah.
with a psychiatrist 101, and then that's it.
And there needs to be more money allocated towards that, because you need to understand the mental capacity of one's person with a badge and with a gun in their hand.
Mm-hmm.
At what point in time do you do something? Do you escalate it or do you de-escalate it? That needs to be going into consideration.
And it's not one particular race. It's across the
Yeah.
board. Like I
Yeah, it's
know a
across
lot
the board.
of black officers who, you know, probably was bullied a lot. Now they have a badge and a gun. Now,
That's
you
exactly
know,
the point. We
you
know a
have
lot of them
it's
that wasn't
white,
popular in high
Asian.
school. Yep,
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
It's a
Now
lot. It's across
they
the
feel
board.
tough now because they have a badge and a
Mm-hmm.
gun, and
Yeah.
they out to prove something.
So
They have
they'll
to articulate
escalate
those.
situations where, like, dude, you don't even have to escalate it that much. Like, you know, you learn how to bring things down a little bit. But that's not a race thing. But to your point when you were talking about just excessive force, I think as a black officer and a lot of like minority officers who, especially us who grew up on the south and west sides of Chicago, I've been in a lot of situations where it could have turned deadly. Like I had probable cause. I could have shot this motherfucker because he had a gun, and but in my mind, like as a black person, like I'm used to this. I grew up in Inglewood, like I think black officers or officers who have grown up in certain communities, in the same communities that we were patrolling, we give that extra time. Like I know he gonna throw it. He better throw it. Then he throw it. But I had a situation with a juvenile like that. I'm like, he got a gun. So I get out my car. He takes off. We're running in the gangway. He has the gun. You know, I have my gun out, but I'm like you better throw it. Like you better throw it. So he looks back at me and then he throws it. You know, we end up getting him or whatever. But when I was processing him, he was like, "Thank you for not shooting me." And I'm like, you know, if it was another officer here, you would have been laid out in this gangway, right?
Yeah.
He's like, "Yeah, I know." He's like, "I'm sorry." You know, and it's just like, bro, like you lucky it was me. Because had it been someone, an officer who grew up in Naperville and decided to be a Chicago police officer and never encounter a high stress situation like this, you would have been shot, and it would have been justified because you have this gun and you turning, you turning to throw it, but someone can articulate like he was turning toward me. I thought he was lifting his hand. I thought he was gonna shoot at me, or
that instinct just kick in, like boom, in a split second, it just changed from good to bad or bad to worse, just within a nanosecond of a time. And so, and to that point, it needs to be more policing in the communities that you actually are from, rather than those who are coming from suburban areas and going back to their homes safely and soundly with their families, and then here you are having to deal with the situation that happened with one of your loved ones being killed in the that you live in. And so that needs to happen consistently, because I've been seeing situations where a lot of different police officers are policing in areas that they aren't familiar with, they don't relate to, they're not from. That needs to happen across the board everywhere. And
in order to see change, in order for us to see change in the future, we have to be on the job. Like a lot of people are like, well, why are you police? I'm like, if you want to see change, we all have to be
in it.
Like I'm valuable here to be part of the change that we want to see on this department. Like we can't just keep, talking shit from the sidelines and expecting change. So we need more of us on this job, and that's just,
Real quick to your point, Chris. Now, what would you say to that? Before we let you go.
I don't know about Alex, but I'm a field training officer in Baltimore, and I do get officers, and like, it's nothing against them. They're perfectly nice guys, but you can tell they came down from Pennsylvania or New Jersey or New York, like up north New York, and they've never had to deal with excuse the term, but like the Tyrones and the Shaniquas that we had to deal with, that we grew up in the South Side. And it's like, it's hard to teach them, because it's like, they like, I know going into a call, just because the people are yelling at each other doesn't mean that they're violent. Like, yeah, so hey, they're just working it out. You can tell, like, he's on one side of the room, she's on the other side of the room. Yeah, they're cursing each other out, but nobody's picked nothing up. Nobody's like taking off his shirt. So nobody's like, nobody's actively being a threat. So I'm comfortable being in the middle of that. Like, hey, okay, no, eventually I might tell them, hey, okay, everybody shut the hell up because I got to figure this out. But, I get trainees where as soon as we walk into that situation, they're going for their nightstick or like, oh, wait, dude, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, 'cause in their mind, where they're from, people talking that loudly means that there's an imminent fight.
Yeah.
And then, like, you go to the next call where it's still the situation might be similar, but then they start ignoring all the signs that, yeah, okay, this actually is about to be a fight. Get ready to grab him or grab her and take them to another room because they're about to fight each other. But it's hard to instill that in somebody. Because even now, I have all, because Maryland state law, it won't let the department say that an officer has to live in the same jurisdiction as police. So we have people who still live up in Pennsylvania or Delaware, and they look at Baltimore as just a place that they have to survive for 8 hours before they go back home. And, it gets on my nerves because I live in the city. I like living in the city. And it's like, you have to explain to them, yeah, everything in the city is not Cold Spring and Park Heights, which for you guys still in Chicago, that's like, let's say 107th and State Street. It's like, that's not all. Everything isn't 79th and Halsted, or everything isn't 119th and Michigan, or in my case, like that, everything isn't 5100 Park Heights. But they don't understand. And, part of it has to be, you have to at least be willing to, like, open your mind to the fact not everybody here is a criminal. Because I had a guy who, like that, again, he's a nice enough guy, but he wasn't built to police in Baltimore. And we're riding around, and he's like, oh, yeah, it's a shame, all these people in the drug trade, blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, don't do that. So what you mean? Like, people here, like 95 to 96% of the people here, just like you and me, they're trying to live the best life they can, raise their family in the best way they can. I'm like, no matter how hard you try, you're not moving to Tulsa on minimum wage. Or I guess that would be like Barrington for us. It's like, it's not, you can't just blanket everybody with that. You have to understand that people are going to be in different socioeconomic situations. They're going to have different family situations. And, like, you have to be willing to learn from that and not just put everybody in those situations in the one bag as criminal.
Yeah. So 2 points before I let you go, Chris. One, I want to use a quote that Chris Rock had mentioned in his stand-up on Netflix. He talked about how there are certain occupations where you just can't have bad apples, right? So you can't be bad at this. So, like, for example, an air pilot, right? It's like most of us like to land, but we have a couple of them that tend to crash every now and then. I feel like, and most of the people that I've spoken to about this feel like police, the law enforcement, and firefighters to a lesser degree, you can't get this wrong, because the very second that you take someone's life and it's not justified, you can't bring them back. They can't come back from that. And so oftentimes you see that a lot of those situations where those police officers end up getting fired, they have to live with that on their conscience. They have to wake up and go to sleep with that every day, knowing they took someone else's life. And someone else's family is mourning that person's death while you're still at home being able to enjoy your family, enjoy your time with your wife and kids or husband and kids and stuff like that. And that's unfair. And so the accountability has to be had. And I feel like police is the one occupation on top of fire departments that are where you can't get it wrong. And I know how hard that easier said than done, but I understand that training has to be consistent. It has to be, every officer does have to be monolithic, even if the policies themselves aren't exactly the same in every state and city. The officers themselves and their intent on why they become officers has to be consistent across the board. Then that's the only way to really de-escalate a lot of situations where, all right, you went home safe to your family, they went home safe to theirs. And the two shall not meet ever again in this particular instance. And so that also needs to be taken into account when we're talking about de-escalation tactics or just overall training. And that needs to be much more than 6 damn months. You got other countries that are giving you 2 or 3 years of training to make sure that you understand the severity of what it means to become a police officer.
But I mean, it's easy to look at that on paper and say that, but then these countries are fractions of the size of the U.S.
That's true.
You still have these departments where you have to have, look at a city like New York. Like, you're going to have so many officers. And, when you have a turnover rate of, 15%, where you're losing thousands of officers every year, like, how can you put somebody in the academy knowing, okay, it's going to be 3 years before that person sees the street, but then you're still getting calls from the constituents saying, oh, I want more officers on patrol. I want more officers doing this. I want more officers doing that. You have politicians saying, oh, yeah, we have to have more officers on the street. We have to have this. We have to, and, it gets to the point where, like, my agency is already 500 people short. So it's like, okay, even if we hire 500 people tomorrow, which one's not going to happen, but 6 months from now, you're still losing every month. You're still losing whatever you were losing every month. So by the time that 500 gets through the end, now you need 600. It's easy to look at other countries and say, yeah, we need to do that. But at the same time, you also have to look at the reality of the situation. Like I said, we've been losing more people than we've been able to hire every year since I started.
Yeah, I remember you talking.
And so we're a fraction. We're down to a fraction of what we had, even when I started. We have a budget for 3,000 officers, but we're hovering somewhere around 1,900 to 2,000. And I said, to put people in the academy and know, it's bad enough knowing, okay, you got 6 months, and then you still got the field training for the people to go through before they're full-fledged officers. But to put it out and say, okay, now you got to wait 3 years, 3.5 years to see this person on the street, with our attrition rates and everything the way it's going, we wouldn't be able to survive.
Yeah. Now, to that point, I want to say this too, as far as accountability goes, right? So when there are situations where officers are indeed involved in a shooting and police brutality of any kind, they ultimately get fired, right? But then they get to go to another city and state and become police officers there too. Like that makes no sense to me. And so that needs to be data that's put in the system throughout the country, where if you're involved in one here, then damn it, the likelihood of you doing that there is very damn likely. And so you don't need to be a police officer. That's showing that this is not the profession for you. And I get it. Everyone's not cut out to be a police officer. Everyone is not. And to your point, Alex, that you made earlier about sometimes you look at people and be like, just on your regular day job, like, how the hell did you get this job? Like, who in their right mind will hire you for this? You know what I mean? So that needs to also be taken into account when you're talking about putting lives in the hands of law enforcement that obviously already have this preconceived notion or intent to, show off their brass and show off their gun. I'm the man with the gun. You're gonna listen to me, and versus actually wanting to de-escalate situations and make matters better and not worse. Police officers are in a position to serve and protect, not kill and arrest. And so that has to be, no matter what the policies are.
I'm not disagreeing.
Yeah, that has to
I'm
be.
not disagreeing with you on that. Like, there was a saying when I was, like, one of my academy instructors, I still remember what he said. And, we can teach you whatever, we can teach you what you need to be on there. But if you were a bitch before you put on the uniform, once you put on the uniform, you're just a bitch in a uniform.
Yep, that's exactly what the hell you are.
Like, we can't teach heart to people.
Yeah.
Like, we can't teach you the common sense that, hey, you don't have to talk to grandma the same way you talk to Pookie on the corner. All we can really do is put up, use what we have at our disposal, psychologicals, the observations from your FTO, your supervisors once you're on the street, like people calling in complaints, because that's another big thing of it. You know, I hear a lot. I'll talk to people. I'll go to calls, and people, oh yeah, you were so much more respectful than the last officer. I'm like, well, did you call and complain on that officer? Oh no, I won't do anything. Well, okay, well, yeah, definitely won't do anything if you won't call and let people know, hey, look, maybe there was an issue there.
Mm-hmm.
And like, not saying that officer necessarily has to go directly to being fired, but like maybe he needs to let it go back for more sensitivity training. Maybe he needs to go for more de-escalation training. But you can't just put everything on the system to weed it out. Like it has to come. It has to also have outside input. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Alex, what do you think about that?
I mean, anybody can call to a supervisor or call, like, put in a complaint, call the district. But if you don't even do that basic thing, we don't even know there's an issue.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with Chris, and I always tell people the same thing. I mean, because I always have family members call like, "Oh, this what happened to me, and dude was rude, or this or that." I'm like, "Okay, stay on scene and call back and tell them you want a supervisor on scene, and they have to come on scene and address your issues and file a complaint." I mean, especially in Chicago now. I mean, everyone's jumping on the bandwagon for police accountability, so we have. You can submit a complaint online. You can call. You can text your complaint. You can even file your complaint with Kim Fox. Like, I mean, so police accountability is like, major here in Chicago right now. I mean, even the mayor's posting, always tweeting about it, and so.
Now, this last question I have for you both, but I mean, I'll let Chris go. I still have a couple questions for you, Alex, but. The last question was in regards to something that the dumbass in office said a couple of days ago in an interview. An interview with CNN, Trump says, the reporter asked him, why are black people still being killed at the hands of police officers? His quote was, end quote, so are white people. More white people are being killed more than black people. What the hell do you guys say to that? Now, statistically, I understand because of population, right? So looking at the numbers, there are more white people than there are black. But from a percentage standpoint, we are more likely in a disproportionate rate to be killed at the hands of police officers than a white person is. More white people may die, but they don't necessarily mean that it's going to impact them as much as it will us, because we only make up 13.5% population in the country versus them making up 67 to about 70% of the population. So what do you guys say to just the stupidity of him bringing that up, and even understanding that no one should be dying at the hands of police officers if they don't have to? What do you say to that, Chris?
I mean, I don't really know how you want me to defend the rantings of a crazy
No, don't defend him. No, I just want your viewpoint on it.
Yeah, as far as I'm going to say, that statement made absolutely no sense.
Absolutely.
I mean, but like that, at that point, what does Trump say that does make sense? I don't know. Like, you can't really, at one point, like, I want to be mad at him for saying something stupid, but it's like he said so many stupid things. It's like, well, I'd be more shocked if he said something that made sense.
Very much so. It's like you forget what damn day of the week it is, and here he comes saying something stupid. Like, Trump is a malignant narcissist on top of other things too, right? So he is the type of damn person who lie about the lie that he lied about, and forget he lied about the shit. Like that, it baffles me. I'm just like, and I hate watching him now, and I wish more channels would stop putting him on TV so fucking much, because he's making matters worse. And so, yeah, but Alex, to your point, how do you feel about that?
I mean, I agree with what Chris said. Like, he says so many like weird shit all the time, and it's just like, I've never watched like his press conference and things like that. I just can't. I don't think he's a really good public speaker. And the only thing that I like that he did was that he's offering federal help to Chicago right now. And the mayor, and as much as the mayor and him go back and they play these political games And I'm like,
Yeah.
you guys are playing political games while people are dying, while our children are dying. And
Yeah.
it frustrates me. And she comes at him and he comes at her. And I'm like, Lightfoot, you're no better than him. You're doing this. You're playing the same Twitter tactics that he plays. Like you're calling the press secretary Karen, or she's saying "F you." At the end of the day, I mean, come on, like
We got
if
bigger
they're
shit to
offering more
worry about.
federal help, and Chicago needs the federal help. Like when we have the feds come in and they start charging these violent gun offenders federally, that's when the shit clicks to these shooters out here. It's like, damn, I don't, because if I go to Fed prison, you know, once the feds come, their case already done, they do their homework, you going to jail for 90% of whatever your sentence is going to be. So I just hope and I wish that all these politicians put the politics aside and really come together and let's figure out a plan on how we can curb this violence in Chicago, because it's ridiculous. It's like
it is
every day, you know.
I'm fearful of all my friends and family like yourself. Life. My mother's still up there. My mother called me a week or so ago, telling me about a shooting that happened the very next door neighbor of hers was being shot, and I told my mother, 76 in Racine.
Oh yeah, that's my district.
Yeah, right there in that complex area. So my mother called me.
Oh, she like right there.
Yeah,
it was like
she was out there when the police and it went. Yeah, she was right out there when right after it happened with the police and with news reporters telling her. And I told her, I'm like, Mama, get back in the damn house. I need you to sleep with that gun of yours, because I worry for her, me being all the way in Atlanta, and I can't get to her, and I can't be with her all day, every day. And it's just, that worries me. I'm already worried enough about her safety. But when situations like this happen, it takes me to a whole nother mindset and a whole nother world of concern. And just, and that's not just for her, but it's for all my family that's up there in Chicago. I'm always thinking about them. I'm always praying for everyone up there, because I know what it's like growing up in Inglewood. I know what it was like growing up, seeing how those situations have escalated over the years. It's like, damn, now 79th and any damn thing you can't go on, because it's always something happening up there. And so whenever I go up there and visit, I'm always happy to see friends and family. But then when it's time for me to leave, we go back to my home, because I'm not trying to be on the goddamn news up there. And so, yeah. Again, Chris, I really appreciate you for joining us on this call. And my last question to you is, if it's even possible, how can people reach out to you on your social media platforms if they would just have general questions to ask you about, just police in general?
That's not a possibility.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure.
It's no offense to your group, but like Alex was saying before, every time there's a police involved in some small town I've never been to, I don't know anybody there, I get flooded with messages already about, oh, well, what do you think about this? I don't know these people. Like,
so you're not going to know
easy for me to say, it's just easy for me to keep everything private and not have it flood disturb my peace.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, you still got to go home, and after you punch that clock out, you still have to decompress with dealing with all the politics, all the procedures, all of the situations that happen in the community. You still have a life to come back home to, and that needs, you have to always take care of your mental capacity as well. And so I'm always thinking about you, Chris. I always hit you up, just, hey, cuz how you doing? I just want to make sure everything's okay. You let me know I'm still alive and kicking. I know you had some time to vacate to come down here to Atlanta and visit, but obviously, that'll happen at a later date. Just let me know. Like I said, you're always more than welcome to come down here.
Man, you're always welcome in Baltimore.
Yeah, and I definitely make sure I take you up on that offer. I've been to the DMV area before, and actually like just the surrounding area around Baltimore. So hopefully once this pandemic passes, whenever the hell it passes over, we'll be able to travel again and travel safely. So,
right.
Yeah. But
I definitely got to go, because I'm got to get ready for roll call.
All right. Well, yeah. Appreciate your time, Chris, and definitely I'll be hitting you up, just checking on you, seeing how you're doing, and you stay safe, man, throughout this pandemic and throughout the crisis that's going on in Baltimore. I love you, and I'm always gonna be hitting you up, thinking about you.
All right. Thank you. Good talking with you, and good talking with you, Alex.
All right. Same.
All right. Be safe, man. Be safe. Yeah. All right. So yeah, Alex. So you and I have had conversations about the situations that's happened in Chicago with these different shootings. And obviously you and I see eye to eye on a lot of these different points, right? So with the whole Black Lives Matter movement, separate from all the other organizations who are standing for specific causes, I always equate that to, okay, Black Lives Matter is zoning in on one specific cause, right? So it's about the racial injustice and social inequality and the police brutality that's going on throughout America versus other organizations that we know that exist in Chicago and other cities and states too, where it's saying, okay, stop the violence. We know all the work that Father Flake has been doing over the years in Chicago at St. Sabina with the whole, turn your gun in, no questions asked, they give you money or a gift card or something like that, and then you just just walk away from it. So, and he's been a huge advocate in the community for many years. And so there are a lot of different organizations who are specific to that particular focus versus the Black Lives Matter movement. Obviously is for the totality of police brutality and just accountability from law enforcement's perspective in general. And and I equate that to Me Too. Me Too is specific to women of all colors, who are being victimized and being abused and molested or whatever the case may have been when it comes to men assaulting them. So and we can't just look at them and say, well, all we matter too, or it's us too. Like, no, that particular organization is specific to that focus. So
Right.
and again, Black Lives Matter has been very vigilant and very adamant about what's been going on, but that's not to say that we don't care about us, killing our own, because we do. We understand that Black lives have to matter to us too, but there are organizations that are specific to that focus. And so, to your point about what you brought up on social media with, okay, well, where's Black Lives Matter in this moment? Like, Breast Cancer Awareness Month is specific to just breast cancer. They ain't talking about AIDS. They ain't talking about other forms of cancer. It's not to say that they're not important, but that's what this particular organization is focused on. And so I want to make sure I make that distinction when we all oftentimes generalize on a lot of different things and mold them all together and saying, hey, well, where were you when this happened? No, they're specific to that cause. And so what do you?
I mean, when it comes to Black Lives Matter, I just feel like if your mission and your motto and then your name is Black Lives Matter,
Yeah,
but only if they're killed by a police officer. And what about all the other Black lives that are taken every day? Like during the unrest, there was a off-duty police officer, Black police officer, who was shot in the head and killed during an arrest trying to protect the business. Does his life matter? No one cares. Like, and what about all the Black police officers out there? Do our lives matter? Like, if that's your mission, that's your title, that's what you're going for, Black Lives Matter, it shouldn't just be tailored toward those who are murdered by police officers. I mean, it should matter across the board. And then if you have a platform like Black Lives Matter who can like actually make a difference and get this get the news out there, then why not use this platform to help with the crime in Chicago? Why not let's plan something on the south or the west side, because it's such a big entity now, and you have a major platform and you have a lot of celebrities and rappers and who are getting paid to fly from state to state to for these to give speeches and whatnot. But I mean, that's why I posed before. I'm like, does anybody know how much these people cost so we can get them to start speaking out on their platform about the crime that's going on in Chicago? I mean, I just figure if your name is Black Lives Matter, because it's not like we're looking. I get the point with the other organizations, but the other organizations don't have the voice that Black Lives Matters have right now. And even with all the protests that we've had the past few months, like, I mean, thousands and thousands of people, all these protests, predominantly white people. And I was baffled by Black Lives Matter protests. Nothing, but I'm like, it's not our
even to that
communities
point,
going to these protests.
Yeah, but even to that point,
It's predominantly
we
white
need
people.
our white allies to be in the forefront with us to advocate for Black lives, because we're essentially saying that we're initially saying that Black lives matter also. It's like we don't matter more when we damn sure don't matter less, and that's been the issue all this time, is that our lives only matter when it's convenient to them versus it actually it matters to everyone the same exact way that other lives matter. And so that has been the consistency with with that particular movement and the message behind that movement is that, hey, we matter too. We're human beings too. Do you know there are three of the same fights that we've been fighting all this damn time we've been fighting for our safety, I mean for our freedom, fighting to be human beings and fighting to vote. Like all these different fights, these same three fights, our fathers, their grandfathers have been fighting for hundreds of years. And we're still at this place in time where it's like, damn, we got to tell y'all that we're human beings. The fact that the Constitution had that we were 3/5 of a damn person, like we're not human, like that's bullshit. And that has to be called out on it from a systemic and institutional aspect of it. Like the racism that has occurred systemically and institutionally has been trickling down from generation to generation on in. And so we're putting an end to this shit and saying, hey, enough of this. You're not doing this to us. And so even from that standpoint, it's about every Black life, whether you are an officer, whether you are a lawyer, a judge. If something happens to you that's racially biased or racially motivated, then guess what? We're going to advocate for you too, because your life matters. And I've seen situations where there was a video that surfaced a couple weeks ago where it was a Black officer who was pulled over. He was an off-duty officer being pulled over by cops. It was an FBI agent, a Black FBI agent, that was being questioned and handcuffed by police officers. And he was like, what the fuck are you all doing? Like, seriously? This is what we're resulting to, because we fit a description that's pretty damn vague and very generalized as hell. Because all Black people look alike, right? But we say that shit to you all, then now we're the ones being judged and being looked at as racist. And from a systemic and institutional aspect of it, Black people can't be racist because it's about controlling the narrative and having power, which we don't have. We can be biased, we can be prejudiced, which everyone is. Everyone is to a certain degree. But from that standpoint, we have to understand that, no, all Black lives do matter. And so regardless of whatever your profession is, and what baffled me about the Blue Lives Matter was like, that's your profession. You're not born a cop. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't make sense. It's like that can't correlate the two movements, because you're saying occupation matters versus an actual human life and human an ethnicity, if you will. Those two can't coexist, because one you chose to do, and I get it. Everyone, like I said before, everyone is not meant to be a police officer, and I understand that. But when you make the decision to be a cop, understand what's going to come with that. And it's going to be a lot of scrutiny with what other cops do, other cops don't do. Well, what do you do? It's like, well, listen, I don't know every damn cop in America, and that has to be understood. And I don't do what every cop does, but I'm going to do my part in helping changing the narrative and making sure every cop knows, hey, listen, this is the way we can de-escalate these situations from happening, to have less and less of situations where it results into some type of fatality with a civilian. It doesn't have to always end that way, and that's what that needs to be said consistently. And so, yeah, from that standpoint, I do think that it needs to be a distinction between the different movements throughout the country. That you see the marches in Chicago. I've seen a lot of marches and protests happen in Chicago. Stop the violence, and we have to say that. But as a community, we do have to take into account what responsibilities we fucking hold too, with these kids being out here in the streets, and we're losing them to so many different things, right? And because their families and their parents don't love them enough to care about them and make sure they go on the right path. But then when something happens to them, it's well, now you stop the violence, but you saw him going down the fucking wrong path before then. You didn't do nothing about it. So you're part of the goddamn problem. You can't keep birthing these kids and then expecting the goddamn world to take care of them. That's unfair to the world and to them, and even to you to a lesser degree.
Yeah. So
no,
I agree.
That accountability has to be had on all spectrums, and that's what this whole ideal, just bringing all this to the forefront, is about accountability from the law enforcement, from the judicial standpoint, from lawyers, judges, everyone in law enforcement or the whole justice system in general. It has to be revamped. It has to be funded if it needs to, because and reallocated money towards other things that those things can ultimately help. would be the
Mm-hmm.
key to us having a more successful police force, as far as having that trust with the community and the community having that trust with the police.
Yeah, like we had one protest here. I was just so annoyed by it. It was because everyone's jumping on the defund police wagon and
Yep.
anti-police culture. So it was one with Cook County, and it was like public defenders for Black Lives Matter, or public defenders against police, or whatever it was. But my issue is, okay, as a police officer, now this public defender, all y'all from Cook County want to come out and say you Black Lives Matter, this and that, and it's like, every case I have when I go to court, you don't even open this person's file until the judge calls them. But it's a blame game going on right now. And right
Absolutely.
now it's easier to just blame the police, but everyone has a role in this. Like you said,
Yep.
the state's attorneys, the public defenders, the judges, like everyone needs to be held accountable.
Yep.
Like, so for you to have this march, and I'm like, y'all the main ones putting these people in jail. Like, you don't even try to defend these people, but yet we're gonna blame the police. But you have months to review this case. If you feel like Black Lives Matter, then put in the work.
Yep.
Put in the work to defend them.
Absolutely.
So
From a
don't
systemic
jump on a
standpoint.
bandwagon. Hold yourselves accountable as well. That's the thing. We all got to be held accountable. I have to be held accountable. The state's attorney, everyone, look in the mirror and just start holding yourself accountable first before you just keep playing the blame game over
Yep.
and over, because we're never going to get anywhere with that.
We're not, and we're seeing we're getting nowhere fast. We're on a goddamn treadmill, and we're walking, but we ain't moved no damn where yet. And so, even from a civilian standpoint, like I said about how parents and family members and community members need to understand, it takes a village to raise a child. So that village needs to be doing their part in making sure that these kids aren't going down the wrong path, because you got a lot of these damn pretend ass kids who think they're in gangs and think they know what a gang really is and what it's about. All the while, they just being put out there as fucking pawns to do some dirty work of somebody else's. And then, and these kids thinking that when you die, you're gonna come back next week. This shit don't work like that. So when you're gone, you're gone. That's it. And so for these parents to sit up here and ask everyone to do everything but them to be held accountable, it's unfair. And it's unfair for police officers to consistently have to be put in those situations to make that choice.
Right.
Choice was already yours before it got to this point. Before police were called, you had a choice to make. But at the same token, police officers do have a bigger responsibility because they are enforcing the law. It should be against the law to be against the law, even from a person who's wearing a badge, as well as a person in civilians. And so, and even from a civilian standpoint, we oftentimes see where doors are being kicked down, kicked in. You're looking for this person, that person. You find them, you apprehend them, you arrest them. But it's taking all this goddamn time to arrest somebody who killed Breonna Taylor. Why does it take so fucking long to do that? When you see the evidence now, everything is out there. Everything is clear. Then just last year, we're just now seeing the situation that happened with Elijah McClain in Colorado. Why are we just now seeing this shit? And you all say, oh, we're still doing an investigation. What the fuck is there to investigate more of? You already got all the evidence you need to prosecute these damn people. Come on now. Some shit is just common sense, but obviously, I'm in my recent days, I've been calling it rare sense, because it ain't so fucking common, because everybody ain't got it. Everybody ain't built or born with it, and that's been the problem. So I just think that, again, accountability has to be had on all levels. It can't just be, you can't expect us to obey the law when you yourselves as a badge and gun-toting officer aren't obeying the laws yourselves, and you just getting away with the idea that, okay, ain't really much gonna happen to me, but we're seeing more now happen. It's like, it's after the fact. That person's still dead though. The best thing you can fucking do is get manslaughter, 10 years. Like, come on now. And even to a lesser degree, we have in situations where people, and this is part of Black Lives Matter movement too, is that people who aren't cops, white people who are just out here killing black people, aren't being held accountable.
Right.
Yeah, a Ahmaud Arbery situation down here in Brunswick, Georgia. 2 of these white individuals, one used to be a former investigator, killed this young man jogging down the goddamn street like they were fucking officers. You're not no goddamn police. And so for these white people to have the unmitigated gall to think they are the authorities in the goddamn communities, who the fuck are you? I ain't got to answer to you. You don't wear no fucking badge.
Mhm.
You're not a person I need to be answering questions to. You don't fucking tell me
Mhm.
what to do. That's been a problem, man, because white privilege, well, the systemic and institutional racism that has plagued
Mhm.
our country for far too long has fueled white privilege into white privileged
Mhm.
people into thinking they run shit. You have to listen to
Yeah.
us. We don't have to listen to you. Ain't that a bitch? No, the
Mhm.
fuck, it don't work like that. You don't have a badge on,
Exactly.
fucking listening to you. Citizens arrest
Mhm.
my ass. You don't sit there, if I'm not disturbing the
Exactly.
peace, I'm not raising any havoc, I'm not breaking any laws.
Right.
Who the fuck are you to be sitting up here telling me what the hell I should be or should not be doing? That's the part that baffles me. And so the prosecutor that was formerly a part of that case down here in Georgia, was covering up a lot of situations because there's some type of exclusive or a hidden agenda or some type of relationship that she has with that former investigator. And so I'm just like, see,
Mhm.
it needs to be a third party who's
Yes.
unbiased coming
Mhm.
into situations like this to making
Mhm.
sure that both sides are heard and met equally versus,
Okay.
all right, we're going to side with our brethren in uniform versus the goddamn civilians who could be
Mhm.
possibly making this shit up. So you just gonna automatically just discount and discredit our goddamn story in the matter,
Right.
and that's unfair. You all
Exactly.
are supposed to serve and protect us. We pay
Mhm.
taxes for you all to do just that. So you
Mhm.
can't sit up and tell me you're gonna take the law in your own hands to do your own thing, and no
Mhm.
accountability is had. No, we can't keep having that shit, and we're not gonna
Right.
keep having that. And so yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely I understand from the standpoint of what's going on in Chicago, and you and I both know how I feel about my city. I live in Chicago.
Mhm.
I mean, I live in Atlanta, but none in my house say Atlanta on it for the goddamn light bill and my driver's license. I'm Chicago
Mhm.
everything, so I'm always
Mhm.
always staying abreast of what's going on in Chicago. I'm always checking in on friends and family and stuff like that to see if everyone's okay. Even despite
Mhm.
this pandemic, it's still those situations that's happening with Father's Day
Yeah.
weekend and Fourth of July weekend shootings and stuff like that.
Mhm.
It worries me because I'm always hesitant to even pick up the phone to see if it's somebody that I knew. But even the people that I
Yeah.
did know, it's still sad because it's
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
this shit didn't have to happen. Everyone
Yeah.
has a choice to make in making sure the
Mhm.
situation doesn't keep escalating the way it has been in recent years. And so,
Mhm.
I definitely do. The only way Chicago gets fixed is if Chicago fixes it. No one outside of
Mhm.
Chicago can fix Chicago. Now, I always
Mhm.
feel like if you ain't from Chicago, don't be fucking talking about my city. I don't like that because
Mhm.
Chicago is much
Yeah.
more. It's much more to Chicago than just the
It
damn
is.
violence. And
Mhm.
so it's a lot of great things happening in Chicago
Mhm.
that the violence sometimes it just discredits
Overshadow
those good
it.
things. It's
Mhm.
always overshadowing those things.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
I'm always I get on anybody ass quick in a second
Mhm.
talking about Chicago. Hey, you ain't
Yeah.
live there, you ain't from there. Don't be talking that shit about my
Right.
city now. Because every
Exactly.
goddamn city is messed up. In the words of Bernie
Mhm.
Mac from our high school, some of your family members
Mhm.
fucked up too. So guess
Yep.
what? Your city
Mhm.
might have some of the same issues, may not be to the same degree as we have them,
Right.
but it still
Mhm.
happens. Crime happens
Exactly.
everywhere. And so it's not just subjected to just one city or state, but we all have to do our parts in the community as well as our community leaders and our
Mhm.
politicians. We had to hold their ass in the fire, make sure they do their fucking jobs. It's unfortunate we have to force them to do it, but hey, that's the nature of the beast.
Right.
And with our
Mhm.
police, we needed more police officers in our communities who are from there who can de-escalate situations
Mhm.
better than anybody else because they can relate to us.
Right.
Oh, I know your mother, boy. You better sit your ass down somewhere, or I'm
Right.
gonna tell your daddy or
Mhm.
stuff like that. That type of
Mhm.
stuff has to be had because it's happened in
Yes.
the past and it's been
Mhm.
effective. So
Mhm.
yeah, that needs to be consistent. But yeah,
Yeah.
my last question to you is, I mean, even a question I asked Chris,
Mhm.
uh, because I know you oftentimes get a lot of questions asking you about police everywhere, right? So
Mhm.
everyone's always asking the nearest officer they know, well, what do
Mhm.
you think about this? Or should I say this or
Mhm.
support that? Uh, Can anybody, is it fair to reach out to you if indeed any situation happens
Mhm.
where police advice or just law
Mhm.
enforcement advice and suggestions could be given out by you?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, they can reach out to my Facebook. Just Google Alex Marie, or
Yeah.
go through you and find me on
Yeah.
your friend list. So yeah, for sure.
Okay. Yeah. So my last segment of the show is a segment I like to call "I'm Finna Cuss." Now I already did some cussing, but this
Yeah.
particular segment is highlighting certain things that fucking frustrates the shit out of me about our Black community or what's been done to us as a Black community, right? So a couple of days ago, I made a post about just being taken back and flabbergasted about how many people are still traveling during a pandemic such as this we're dealing with right now. And so my question was, how is it that you all are still comfortable to travel knowing that everybody ain't taking precautionary steps and measures to make sure that they're fucking safe and, obviously practicing social distancing, wearing masks? You having so much pushback with people. One person wants to wear a mask. Another person said it's against the law to wear a mask. And these goddamn politicians everywhere. We're living in the divided states of America because it's not united at all. Ain't no fucking whatsoever. Yeah, one governor saying we're going to reclose the goddamn state. The other one said we're going to keep it open. Another one says, you know what, just do whatever it is you feel like it's necessary for you. What the fuck kind of message is that to be sending? And you're a goddamn governor who's governing over this state. That's ridiculous. And so we're seeing some mayors who are advocating for mask wearing or the mandatory rule to wear a mask, but then we still having pushback. Everyone is not doing this shit, and that's the problem. We're oftentimes hearing about America being the greatest country in the world, but yet we're the ones who are having tremendous amounts of spike with this goddamn virus, while other countries seem to have a better handle on this shit. And meanwhile, we still got people saying, well, I want a vacation and I want to, get away from all this. Listen, I had to fucking cancel 3 goddamn trips this year out of the country because it's not safe to travel right now. And you yourself may be traveling safe and practicing social distancing and wearing a mask, but that doesn't say anything to those who aren't doing that, who are around you on that flight, in that terminal, or when you get to the destination. Now, mind you, some of those countries are practicing social distance a lot better than this country is, but at the same token, it's coming back to the shit that you got to deal with. You're coming back to the States when your vacation is over with, and guess what's going to happen? You're going to potentially get yourself exposed, being in a confined space, and then exposing others. That's the way a virus works, right? It fucking spreads. And there are 3, and I'm not a medical expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I know a few things about how viruses do tend to contaminate and get into your body, through your eyes, through your nose, through your mouth. Because those are the 3 elements, 3 areas where what's the word I'm looking for? The word I just lost. Mucus. That's what it is. So the three areas that mucus oftentimes get in and come out of is through your eyes, nose, and mouth. And so when I'm not sitting up and telling anybody that wearing a mask is going to decrease your chance of getting the goddamn virus by 0%. I'm not saying that. But would you rather wear a mask that's going to potentially decrease the likelihood of you getting the goddamn virus versus not wearing one at all, and you see the pictures all willy-nilly? Oh, I don't have to wear a mask. You got these goddamn politicians and governors and whatever sitting up here saying, well, we're going to leave it to the people to do that. So you're hired and appointed to these goddamn official seats and shit, but you won't even do the very damn thing that we're asking everyone to do, to even flatten the curve with this shit. The only way we're going to get out of this shit is if we do it together. And we can't do it half-assed. Can't be a handful of us being protective and the other half like, well, I'm going to do my own thing any damn way. We ain't going to never get out of this shit. We're going to be stuck in 2020 for the next 5 fucking years. We keep this up, we won't ever get out of this shit.
I know.
It just baffles ridiculous. The shit out of me how so many people are just with this rebellious ass, I'm about myself, I'm going to protect myself mindset. I equate wearing a mask to wearing a goddamn seatbelt. None of us want to fucking do it, but guess what? It's not just to protect the safety of you, but it's also to protect the safety of the other drivers and passengers and other goddamn cars. We have to do what we have to do now so that we won't have to keep doing this shit later. I want to go on trips, but I can't sit up here and risk getting myself infected and then affecting my own family to the shit too. What you do personally affects and infects or could infect other people around you. So your decision ain't just on you. It's on all of us to make that conscientious decision to practice social distancing, to wearing a mask. We have to all do our part in this shit in order to get out of this shit. Because 2020 is fucked. We can forget about Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's, all that shit. Ain't nothing to celebrate. What do you celebrate?
Exactly.
And when these countries close their borders down and have travel bans against America, and not allow Americans to
Mhm.
travel there, where the fuck you gonna go then?
Mhm.
You're gonna go from state to state. You're gonna go from one infested state to the next,
Exactly.
infecting more goddamn people and being
Mhm.
infected by more people.
Yep.
It baffles, man. This whole, it is what it is. It's God's
Mhm.
will. If it's God's will,
Mhm.
and if it's my time to go, it's my time to go, and life is short. That's bullshit, man. And I'm
Mhm.
calling it a tall glass, a dirty bullshit with some goddamn ice in it. We can't keep doing. We can't keep operating like that.
No.
Life is short, but guess what? It's gonna get real fucking. It's gonna get even
Mhm.
shorter. You keep this shit up.
Exactly.
You
No.
only live once. Oh well, it ain't my time to fucking go. And I know
Exactly.
good and damn well, God don't want me to go like this. I'm
Mhm.
not going out with this
Mhm.
virus. I'm not going
Exactly.
out into this unless I need to. I'm
Right.
going to make sure I do what I can and try to advocate for others to do the same damn thing in order for us as a country to get
Mhm.
out of this shit. We
Yeah.
can't keep operating with some of us, but not all of us. No,
Exactly.
every last one of us has to be hands in with this shit, man,
Mhm.
in order to get out of this. I want to
Mhm.
travel safely. I want everyone to travel safely
Mhm.
in this situation right now. But right now ain't the time to be traveling.
Yeah.
But
And it's
this is
simple.
my
It's
opinion.
very simple. It's very simple. Just wear a mask. Limit your traveling, whatever. Outside, social distance. It's simple. It's like
But
it's
again,
not
it's the
difficult.
rare sense that I call it because
Mhm.
every fucking
Mhm.
body ain't got it.
Right.
If it wasn't rare, it would be common. That's the opposite.
Mhm.
It's common.
Exactly.
But even
Mhm.
to that point, you got people who are, well, I'm just gonna be concerned about me and mine. Well, you and yours can be affected just like me and mine can. We
Mhm.
keep this shit up, we're never gonna get out of this shit, man.
No. Ugh.
And it's
Yeah.
that just fucking grinds my damn
Mhm.
gears with the
Mhm.
understanding that everyone is just so rebellious and just out to do their own damn thing. Meanwhile, other countries are sitting up here laughing at us like,
Mhm.
y'all the greatest country in the world, aren't you?
Right.
What the fuck are you all doing?
Mhm.
Why are we still having more and more spikes happen? State Texas is closed. California is closed. Arizona
Mhm.
is closed. Florida need to fucking close, but you
Yeah.
keep letting people in. You keep
Mhm.
letting them do wherever the fuck they want to do.
Mhm.
And human beings are just showing me that we would do the best that we want to do, not the best that we can do.
Mhm.
Because we're not doing our best. We're not doing it on a consistent basis. And that's the fucking problem, man. We want to
Right.
get out of this shit alive. I don't, and it's unfortunate that, and I'm not wishing this on anybody whatsoever, but people won't get it until they get it.
Mhm. That's
That's the
true.
unfortunate
Mhm.
fact about this shit.
Yeah.
When you get it, then you're gonna be crying wolf, hoping everybody pray for you and shit. And again, I'm not wishing this on anybody because
Mhm.
I don't want nobody to get. I want everybody to travel safely. I want
Mhm.
everybody to be mindful of this shit, man, because we literally are all in this shit together. And the fact
Yes.
that we as black people are disproportionately affected by this
Mhm.
more than any fucking body else, that should be a bigger alarm that goes off in your fucking,
Mhm.
like, you know what? We're dying at a higher rate than everybody else is. So
Exactly.
I need
Let's
to
take
be
it
doing more of
serious.
this.
Mhm.
Yeah, come on now.
Mhm.
Two
Yeah.
plus two is four. God damn it, it ain't gonna never
Mhm.
be five.
No.
That just irritates me, man. And I want to see all of us make it out of it.
Mhm.
I don't
Yeah.
want this to keep happening. I don't want to go into 2021 with this shit. But understanding that it takes 18 months to 2 years to come up with a vaccine. Now you're talking about expediting this shit in 3-4 months. Bullshit. I bet you I
Yeah.
won't take that shit.
Mm-mm.
You got to be crazy.
No.
I'm not gonna put that shit in my damn body. No, y'all ain't finna
Right.
test this shit. Hell
Exactly.
no. No, I'm
Mm-mm.
not doing that. And I have a friend of mine who obviously works for the CDC, I'm gonna
Mhm.
bring him on the show to talk a little bit about this
Mhm.
whole pandemic in general and just what precautionary steps we need to be all taking consistently because
Mhm.
everybody doing their own damn thing
Yeah.
and none of it's working right now.
Right.
And so
Yeah. No, I
yeah,
agree.
I just had to get that out because yeah,
Okay.
that's part of the show. Is my segment
Mhm.
cussing about shit. I'm
Mhm.
always looking to uplift us, and the
Mhm.
whole premise behind this show is to highlight those who are in the trenches, on the front lines, and making a huge immediate impacts and a difference in the
Mhm.
community, such as yourself, such as Chris,
Mhm.
in every profession. So again,
Mhm.
talking about the last episode, where I have two licensed professional counselors who are in the mental health
Mhm.
field talking about these different things and how we can best deal with these situations, how to reach out for that mental health, advice and suggestions on
Mhm.
what to do with just consuming so much of this fucking information that it definitely takes a toll on. It takes a toll on your mental capabilities
Yeah.
to effectively do your jobs, whatever that job is. And so even from law enforcement standpoint, I can only imagine what you go through on an everyday basis. And I'm always thinking about you, and always thinking about every last one of you all who are in law enforcement, who are actually out to make a difference and want to see the change that we want to be about from a systemic standpoint. And to your point, in order for us to really see a goddamn change in this shit, we have to be in it in order to, infiltrate whatever the systemic institutional racism that is, and fight it from within, not just from without. And so I appreciate everything that you are doing out there in Chicago. I'm oftentimes, I'm be checking up on you even more, making sure everything is okay, and hoping that, again, I'm gonna bring more officers on board too from other cities and states too, to kind of share their insight on what's going on from their perspective in those particular situations. But I do appreciate you being on the show. I'm always, like I said, I'm always thinking about you, us being classmates, and we CVS for life, all that good shit. And so keep doing what you're doing, protecting the city however way you can, and obviously being an advocate for that change within your unit, within your department, all that good stuff. And so hoping we seeing more officers like you making a difference in our Inglewood neighborhoods and the South Side, West Side.
There are a lot of us.
That's good.
There are a lot of us. So.
And I hope that tree continues to grow, and those branches continue to grow out, and we having more of those, more of these conversations in our communities, because it needs to be more town halls where the community can come in and say, okay, this is what I feel, and I feel like you all need to be doing more of. And it's not just sitting down and talking, but it's actually fucking listening. And it's coming up with solutions together to best help our community thrive a lot better than what it's been doing.
Yes.
Because we know we have the capabilities of doing that, but obviously the point about funding, some of those funds need to be reallocated to community outreach programs, community centers. Education needs to be had thoroughly with our kids, and making sure that they understand what the law is, and what it is they have to do as civilians to obey the law. So from that perspective, I hope that we continue to fight and bring awareness to all this, because it's going to help us more than hurt us.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate all your insight on this. Again, I'm hoping that I can eventually have at least one representative, like one police officer from every city, major city and state, to talk about what's going on, and even some of the rural states, like some of the suburban states. I mean, suburban cities and areas too. They can speak to about what's going on in those particular areas also. So.
Okay, cool.
Again, Alex, thank you for your time, and definitely let people know about this episode, and share it with as many people as you like. It'll be on YouTube as well, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, all those different podcast avenues and platforms. So,
okay,
all right. Be safe out there. I love you. I'm always thinking about you, and I'll be checking on you to making sure that everything is all right. Because anybody, I don't care, I ain't no officer, but anybody fucking with Alex, we're gonna have a goddamn serious problem over there.
All right, thank you. All right,
enjoy and be safe.
Okay.
Yeah, be safe with the pandemic and everything that's going on. So
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right.